Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was assigned to Asuma and Team 10. Mizuki never got to shoot his mouth off at Naruto the night he took the Scroll of Seals. Other than skipping a half-manic monologue from him, what exactly did this change for everyone's favorite blonde ninja? Who knows? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 48, Trouble Comes Running. Guren's eyes were stuck firmly on the form of one Uchiha Itachi, even as her warden of sorts remained frozen in a statuesque manner right in front of him. Knowing what he had done to freeze him in place, she shut her eyes tightly so that she wouldn't fall victim to whatever torturous illusion he would try to ensnare her in next. "What is Akatsuki doing here?" Guren said. Damn it, those Konoha bastards could have put a flaw into her restraints so that she could do something about things like this. You've got no business in Otagakura affairs. Don't be so foolish. Itachi said, moving past the unaware Naruto that he had ensnared in an illusionary world inside of his own head. Otagakura affairs are Akatsuki affairs due to the fact that your leader used to be one of us. We still require his ring back, by the way. Did he keep that hand I took from him? The struggling Kunoichi eventually stopped and laughed, bitterly resigning herself to her fate. So it's either me or the kid Jinchuriki over there that you want. I would have figured that he would be your priority, what with your almighty goal to capture all of the world's Biju. She spat venomously. How's that going, by the way? It is of no concern to you. Itachi walked closer to Guren and pointed back at the still frozen Naruto, and that one is merely a stand-in, by the way. Even if I were here to capture the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, all I would be getting would be a substitute for the real thing. Why would the real Naruto be on a ship by himself? That was not how any Konoha ninja acted. It would be leaving someone alone and vulnerable. If that Naruto hadn't been a clone, neither he nor Guren would have been on that ship. They would have risked taking her out into the open and moving her through potentially hostile territory before leaving only one of their ninja alone with her on a ship with just one person watching over her. The Naruto in the room being a clone was the only thing that made sense, especially since Naruto was kind of famous for using the Kagebunshin technique. Damn it. Guren hoped that she could swerve Itachi out of possibly doing something to her by taking his potential attention away from her. And that meant it was her he had been interested in. Having Itachi interested in you was not supposed to be a good thing. How did you know I was here? We didn't. It was mere chance. Another bark of nasty laughter came from Guren, as it would have been just her misfortune to be caught by not one but two of her enemies in short order. Sheer dumb luck. You don't say? I would have figured that the almightily fearsome Uchiha Itachi would have used his all-seeing eyes to get my trail all the way from back when I was a little girl to now and followed me across the sea just to interrogate me. That, or you could always be coincidentally trapped aboard an out-of-place vessel of our target enemies that we were going to take down regardless. Itachi seemed to tower over her. Of course that could have just been the stockade she was trapped in. People often overlook luck as a deciding factor in the lifespan of a ninja. Right, because when I think of Uchiha Itachi I think lucky. Guren witnessed Itachi kneel down and look her in the eyes, and that was that it. The next thing she knew, she found herself bound in a shifting ethereal realm of black. Oh great. I still have dregs of Yamanaka girl's homemade truth serum in me. And you're in my head, so that already gets past any mental defenses I have to keep me from talking. So what the fuck do you want? Coarse language aside, Itachi was still in firm control of the situation. My question is simple. Where is the Sanbi? A twitch of Guren's eye let him know that she was fighting his request to answer him. Please answer or else. Heh. I've had my mind cavity searched and violated by some mouthy blonde girl, and now I've got to deal with you. Guren said, looking to physically struggle to hold back from talking. Whatever happened to the good old-fashioned physical tortures, huh? People just don't have the stomach for it anymore, do they? A sigh came from Itachi before Guren began to feel hot around her feet. Like a slow-burning strip of paper, her feet caught on fire and began to burn. Sadistic bastard, apparently you didn't have enough of whatever serum is inside of you to answer that question, so I will attempt to ask you again. The location of the Sanba, please. He asked while Guren fought the urge to scream out in pain. Guren's pained and struggling grunts persisted as she looked at the genjutsu avatar of Itachi that was just standing over her, staring at her as she suffered the effects of his attempt to interrogate her. Inside of the Naruto clone's genjutsu, Naruto clone stood in another ship setting like the one that he had been in prior to looking into the eyes of the person dressed in a black cloak with red clouds. He refrained from trying to power through the genjutsu because if this fool was really going to take him away, all that would do would be to show the original Naruto where an Akatsuki hideout was. It would actually be more beneficial to be taken than to actually try to fight it, so the Kagebunshin merely tried to get a handle on just what the situation was. Well, you guys. I wondered when you would find me. Hello Naruto-kun. Genjutsu Itachi said calmly, waiting for this Naruto to try and struggle and fight him to drive himself deeper into the illusion. But it never came. I assume you know who I represent. Naruto clone just nodded stiffly. I am not here for you yet. I merely stumbled across you at the wrong time. You are still free, for now. Why so generous? Naruto clone asked with a joking grin, but the tone behind the words were serious. I didn't peg Akatsuki for the type to let someone like me go. If Genjutsu Itachi let on to the fact that he knew that this Naruto was a clone, the clone could have merely dispelled itself right then and there and the effort of it all would have been useless. Do not consider it generosity. Consider it merely inconvenience. Your time will of course come, but as long as you are being civil I would like to ask you a question. I don't feel very talkative, but ask away. Naruto clone said tensely, you might get an answer, but you might get my fist in your mouth and my foot in your ass. Just because you are willing to wait doesn't mean I am. If it's gonna happen let's just get it over with. Do you know who I am? Of course I do. I only know one person with Sharingan and two eyes, so if you are not Sasuke that would make you Uchiha Itachi. Well, good for him, he knew the actual identity of his attacker. That was something. How is my little brother by the way? Naruto clone frowned at his Akatsuki adversary. I haven't seen the guy in 3 years, but last I saw he was dealing with a nasty seal on his neck. Other than that he was good though. I haven't seen him since I've been back, but I can only imagine though. Genjutsu Itachi nodded as if he were satisfied by that. Good. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to make Orochimaru suffer for branding my younger brother with his disgusting cursed seal. I truly doubt he is in this country, so ruining whatever he has planned with the Sanba will have to do. Until the next time we meet Naruto-kun. Naruto clone found himself instantly snapped out of Itachi's genjutsu and cursed mentally when he found himself still in the hold. Itachi wasn't there for him, and Itachi had to know that he had been a clone, otherwise he would have just captured him either way as the Akatsuki member that he was. It wasn't like if they had caught Naruto right then they couldn't simply keep him imprisoned until they needed him. No, his identity as a clone had been known from the moment Itachi, the real Itachi, had seen him. And he looked over at Guren to find her forehead beaded with sweat and her breath coming out heavily. Way to play prison guard, brat clone. Guren said, as the fact that it didn't feel like her body was on fire anymore was a magnificent sensation of relief. Sucker for a genjutsu are you? Oh, shut up. Naruto clone said as he walked over to make sure that Itachi hadn't harmed his prisoner past the mental trauma that he had inflicted. I didn't break it because I thought he was there for me and I had a plan. I could have just dispelled too, you know. Then you'd be here by yourself. Guren wished she could get free just so she could hit the clone. Yes, because you're such fantastic company. I'd rather be Itachi's prisoner. Then at least I'd have something handsome to look at, or he could at least trap me in a pleasant genjutsu for being good. Still, it was weird though. Itachi killed his entire clan in one night with the exception of Sasuke. Naruto clone understood why Itachi didn't kill him because he might have known about the Kagebunshin memory secret, but he didn't get why he didn't kill Guren. He had gotten what he had wanted from her. Getting rid of her should have been as easy as flicking out his wrist at that point. She had to have given him something pretty damn good if it came to letting her go. A clan slaughterer didn't seem like the merciful type just for the sake of morality. What did Itachi do to you? Naruto clone asked Guren as he wiped the sweat from her face. You had to have told him something while I was under. What did he want to know? He said something about the Sanbi. What the hell did you know about it? That had to have been what Itachi was there to take. Akatsuki was all about taking the Biju after all. Guren just growled at Naruto and glared at him. Did he really think he was going to get any help from her just because they had shared a similar predicament? Hers was far worse. Oh, well, while your little Yamanaka girlfriend was diving through my head, you should have had her check in on that. The Oto Kunoichi bitterly taunted. There was nothing she could do from her position to stop Itachi, so in the instance that she couldn't get away and give ample warning to those that she needed to warn about the coming Akatsuki storm, she could at least make it so that the situation didn't get worse for Otogaku's base in Mizu no Kuni by keeping Konoha's nose out of it as much as she could. They didn't need to know anything more than they already did, especially when it came to a question that they had never asked. Hopefully Kimimaro and his people could handle it. Admittedly, Naruto had no personal stake in anything that happened to the Sanbi outside of the loose affiliation fact that he was a Jinchuriki with the Kyuubi within him. Sticking it to Akatsuki by keeping them from getting their hands on a Biju, while keeping them from their overall goal in the grand scheme of things, didn't apply to him as a Konoha ninja at all. Still though, the enemy of your enemy could be your friend, or just another enemy depending on how things worked. Especially if things moved in a triangle the way that it did in this scenario. Konoha was in Kiri for Otogaku, but Oto had problems with Akatsuki for when Orochimaru was kicked out for whatever he did, and in turn Akatsuki was never going to be on Konoha's friendly side for their marked and alarming goal of trying to amass all of the Biju in the elemental nations and the fact that they had formerly had two of the most infamous missing nin that the village had ever produced in Itachi and Orochimaru. Nothing good could ever come of that. Before Naruto clone could really get in on trying to yank some impromptu information out of Gurren somehow, the ship began to quake terribly before a grand groan came from the vessel and a hole was punched into the hull as water began cascading in. Well, there went that whole atypical mercy idea about Itachi, straight out the window. Outside of the ship, Kisame chuckled to himself as he observed the damage that he had just wrought upon the ship after Itachi told him that they were done there. He stopped laughing though when he saw Itachi simply staring at him. Was he mad? Kisame couldn't tell. What? We are trying to keep a low profile, Itachi said in a monotone fashion as he stared his partner down. I know. Kisame contended with a shrug, that was why I didn't blow it up. Look, he said, pointing at the steadily sinking ship, that thing's heading to the bottom of the river. No one that didn't know it beforehand would even know it was there, and also by default us. He finished with a shark-toothed grin. In his defense, he didn't know what had been on board. Since Itachi told him that he had gotten what they needed, he figured that it was just some expendable Oto body, or several. Itachi just stared at him for another moment before turning and moving along. Come. We have work to do. Apparently, Itachi had been truly indifferent to it, because he simply let it slide. Our destination is south. Meanwhile, Kirigakure no Sato, Mizukage's office. The Konoha party stood calmly in front of the desk of the first female Kage in the lands, flanked by Haku, Suijutsu, Chojiura, and Off for security purposes as they waited on the Mizukage to return to the office. As they waited, Shikamaru found himself standing closest to Suijutsu, and as troublesome as it was, his curiosity was getting the best of him. Hey, he said, getting the silver-haired swordsman's attention, how did you end up with Haku? You two don't seem compatible, I guess. Suijutsu just chuckled and scratched his nose. She says I remind her of Zabuza-senpai somehow. That pisses me off, by the way. He intentionally said loud enough for Haku to clearly hear, only to get a wave back to show that she didn't care, but I'm into her too. I owed her at first because she saved my ass from Otogaku in a raid on a small lab, but what can I say? The ladies in this country love the strong swordsman. The 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist are like rock stars in some places, right, Chojiura? Chojiura muttered bashfully that he wouldn't know, but Shikamaru was more interested in something else. Wait, they caught you before? Suijutsu angrily thought back to what had happened 2 years before. Damn right they did. The fuckers put me in a sealed-off tank so I couldn't escape and experimented on my body to try and break down my clan's jutsu. That's what they do to everyone. Everyone else isn't as lucky to have a body like mine though. He barely felt anything. He had seen some things done to others in that hellhole with some of the sick-ass scientists though, especially from that prick in purple with the glasses that showed up once every blue moon. There's a special spot reserved in hell for people like them. Ah said as he had borne witness to some of Otogaku's scientists' human experiments in small facilities on the mainland that they had discovered, Our 7 swordsmen are usually like Suijutsu here, pretty brutal in battle. But those people don't have any excuse other than trying to play God for an egomaniac. Which is precisely why we need to put a stop to this here and now. Turning around, the entire gaggle of shinobi parted as Terumi Mei, the Mizukage, walked coolly through the office and sat down at her desk with a beautiful smile on her face. "It is wonderful to meet you all," she greeted with her hands folded underneath her chin. "As you have probably guessed, I am the Godaima Mizukage." Taking the initiative as team leader, Yamato bowed to her and took the head in regards to speaking. "We're ready to do what we can to help rid you of Otogaku's influence on your lands. I'm certain you are all up for the task," Mei stated, gesturing to the lot of them. "You all have reputations and are famous for your own reasons. Sarutobi Asuma, son of the Sandaime Hokage and a man that boasts a 35 million ryo bounty placed on his head. Mitarashi Anko, Orochimaru's only apprentice that broke away from her master's dark influence. Yamato-san, better known by the previous codename of Tenzo, the holder of the Mokuton Kekai Genkai and a genius Umbu ninja." Well, when she puts it that way, Ino thought to Naruto, and he was able to hear her due to the telepathic link that the two had established to chat in silence while waiting for the meeting to begin. "I'm feeling kind of inadequate right now. Why aren't we famous?" "I'm actually kind of famous," Naruto mentally admitted through the link, much to Ino's shock which showed on her face. "Yeah. I found that out while I worked with the Guardian Ninja group. Some people knew who me and Shika were before we even did anything for them. You too actually. What in the world are we famous for?" The question was answered by Mei, who caught on to the little bit of psychic play going on between the two kids. "And I know about you 3 as well, Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru, and Uzumaki Naruto. Don't think that people have forgotten about your victory in the largest Chunin exam in the history of the unified system. It was only 3.5 years ago. That's why." Naruto thought to his blonde teammate as Mei confirmed what he had been saying. Apparently it had been just as big of a deal as it had felt like it had been at the time if people were able to identify them solely off of that. "It did open some doors though. It's kind of weird that the Mizukage knows my name, kind of cool," Naruto admitted, sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck at being put on the spot. "It's kind of troublesome really," Shikamaru said in return. "I don't want people to know who I am. Who wants to be a big illustrious target for some wannabe to try and take out for name recognition? Not me. Pay. You're nobody until somebody tries to kill you, kid." Said matter-of-factly. "Every strong shinobi has enemies. You can't say you're a good ninja if no one wants you dead. No one wants you," was how the Mizukage misheard and perceived Ao's words to the youngsters in the room. She simply looked at him with a brightly pleasant smile and addressed him accordingly with what she thought he said. Shut up or I'll kill you." Scratched his temple confusedly, but did as requested. He didn't want to be melted in the middle of the floor. Suijutsu just snickered while Chujuura and Haku simply acted as if she hadn't threatened one of her own shinobi with extreme physical violence. Carrying on with the meeting as planned, Mei got things back in line once more. "We can't commit a decent strike force to the southern island territories to try and take on Otogaku's main facility," she said with a frown on her face. "It will be seen as an act of aggression with some of the neighboring countries and they'll use it as an excuse to move forward and try to take some of Mizu no Kuni's islands as recompense. I hate politics." Asuma mumbled to himself, wishing he could smoke inside at the moment. He hated briefings and meetings like this, fucking backstabbing, under the table, sleight of hand crap. "Indeed, Sarutobi-san," Mei returned, letting out a bit of an airy giggle when she saw Asuma rightfully embarrassed at being heard. "I don't have a taste for politics either, but my village needed me and it had to be done. There was no one else suitable for the position of Mizukage after Yagura reign and the war both ended. But enough about me, we can speak more personally later when there is time," she finished cryptically with a smile. Both Naruto and Shikamaru just turned to stare at Asuma, who was trying to act like he didn't pick up on the underlying point that Mei had just made. Did she just hit on Asuma-sensei? Why didn't something like this happen years ago? Asuma thought to himself as he tried to ignore the looks from his male students. Damn it, he was in a committed if not semi-secret relationship and had a kid on the way. This was no time for infidelity, even if it would have possibly the most beautiful woman he would ever have a shot with. Of course. Business first. Taking pity on Asuma and willing to save him from further scrutiny, Shikamaru spoke up, "So, if you can't send anyone in, why do you think it would be any easier for us? It can't just be because everyone thinks that Konoha is strong. Logistically, none of these countries can afford hostilities with Konoha." Haku chimed in helpfully, "Even if they felt the need to press against Kiri and Mizu no Kuni, if we appear to be allied with Konoha, that would be a major deterrent. Not that we don't wish for an alliance of sorts, because we do. But if you refused to officially sign a treaty with us, the mere appearance of a small group such as yourselves, it would seem diplomatic. And that would force them to back off in theory to keep from involving Konoha in the affairs of the region. Because no one wanted to fight Konoha. Actually, that wasn't true. Tons of people wanted to fight Konoha, it was just that no one thought it was smart to fight a war with Konoha, and no one felt that it was worthwhile to go to war with Konoha. Not by themselves, and no one powerful enough got along well enough to coordinate any ill intent towards the village. Especially since it was also loosely allied with Takigakuer and Tsunagakuer, even if the treaties that bound them weren't even worth the paper they were printed on." Mei gestured toward Haku to state that what she had said was exactly the point. "Of course there is a reason why we sought out Konoha as well. Sarutobi Hiruzen is not an imperialistic warlike Hokage, so letting Konoha know of Kiri's current weakened state of affairs has a low risk of your village trying to take advantage of ours. Couple that with the geographic deterrence keeping your village from offensively pressing ours, as well as your village's ever-standing grievance with Oto's leader, and this is why you were asked to assist us. Because there was no reason to mess with Kiri, because trying to fight Kiri on their turf was way more trouble than it was worth for a village like Konoha, and because of the responsibility they had for unleashing Orochimaru on the world. Those were the reasons that Konoha was selected to request assistance from." That was good enough for Anko, who was doing a decent job at hiding the fact that she was chomping at the bit to get that party started. "Well, let's work out how this is going to be run. Our kids here caught an Oto prisoner and extracted the information on the general area where the island is located toward the south. Yamato as team leader picked up from there. Now I know you can't commit a strike force Mizukage-sama, but we're willing to go and see how bad the situation is ourselves if you'll send us someone that can guide us." "You're willing to do this yourselves?" Mei said in a slightly skeptical tone of voice. It was just 6 of them from Konoha and they were willing to undertake something so dangerous? All they wanted was a guide to assist them. "You're certain of this?" A unanimous series of nods came from the guest squad. Yamato gestured to his team surrounding him. "We're a specially structured infiltration and reconnaissance party. Uzumaki-san is our sensor, Mitarashi-san is a skilled tracker, Yamanaka-san is here to extract information as needed, Nara-san is capable of planning our approach for observation in case we locate our target, and in case battle is necessary Sarutobi-san and myself specialize in direct combat." Konoha had just as much interest in getting information reports on any Otogakuer strongholds as Kiri did. Naruto was about to raise his hand and interject that he specialized in direct combat as well, but Shikamaru elbowed him in the stomach to shut him up and got a glare that could melt steel in return that he ignored. As the reigning Mizukage, Mei wasn't certain if sending out a ninja good enough to guide the Konoha contingent to their target safely was worth the potential loss. She wasn't going to draft anyone to partake in this mission. She had too many important shinobi out and about around the countryside protecting villages near hotspots where civilians had been kidnapped by the enemy. Aside from that, the southern islands were numerous and infamous for housing all sorts of nasty folks. Pirates, raiders, and there was even hearsay of a community of missing nin, but that had always been thought of as a legend that got passed around the hunter nin rookie ranks for kicks. "I'll volunteer for the task," Haku stated with a bow to her village leader. "Please allow me to do this Mizukage-sama. I swear I won't let you down. I know of the southern islands well. During Zabuza-sama and my own escape after his failed coup, that was the route we selected to flee the country and elude the hunter nin. I know how someone hiding in that area would conceal themselves." Suijutsu raised a lazy hand as well. "I'm in too. Those pricks poked and prodded at me like a guinea pig and humiliated me for too long. And besides," he said with a roguish grin showing his sharpened teeth, "I can't let my lady go out island hopping by herself. That's dangerous." So the party seemed to be set. 6 from Konoha, 2 from Kiri, 8 in all. Not a bad small squad for something this big. More would be better, but the known lack of manpower was half the reason that the mission was ranked S rank to begin with. As everything looked to be falling into place, Naruto's eyes widened and he ground his teeth for a second before he held his head in a bit of pain. Ugh, we're going to need a new ride too. The boat we hit on the inlet got sunk. Oto? Ino asked, putting a worried hand on Naruto's arm only to get him to shake his head no. Well, who then? Uchiha Itachi. Akatsuki. The room grew silent and everyone just stared at Naruto as if he were insane, waiting for him to retract that last statement. When it never came, a loud smack noise attracted everyone's attention to Shikamaru, who was palming his forehead. Of course it is. Flashback, on board the sinking ship. There was a horrible grinding noise and then water started pouring into the room from the doorway. Crap, they hit the ship hard enough to sink it. Naruto clone thought in a panic. What was the point of that other than to just ensure that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki had one less way to leave the country that they knew he was in? He couldn't save the vessel and he knew it. There was nothing he could do for it. Damn it, I'm really going to drown here. Gurren said to herself in disbelief as she tried to struggle in vain to free herself. This is bullshit. That's right. He had been trying to pry a bit more information out of her before the ship started to sink. How much time was left? 1 minute, the clone wagered, and then they'd be underwater. He wasn't any kind of interrogator, but there was something important that he needed to know. What did Itachi ask you about the sand before? Gurren glared up at him and remained quiet. He already knows, so you might as well tell me too. Do it and I'll let you escape. You're full of crap, you liar. Gurren shouted back at him as the water was rising up to the standing Naruto clone's knees and getting higher rapidly. No matter what I do, you're just going to leave me here to drown, so kiss my ass. In response, Naruto clone drew his machete and held it to Gurren's stockade as a show that he was serious. Listen, stupid, I'm being dead serious. Akatsuki wants the Sanbi and that's something we can't let happen, whether I'm from Konoha or not, because they want all of the Biju and that's bad. So if Oto is going after it, tell me where it is so we can do something to try and stop them. Gurren just glared up at him and bit her lip as she thought, Uchiha Itachi and whoever his partner is are S-ranked badasses. Yukimaru, he'll die if they get to him. But I can't betray Oto by letting a Konoha ninja find out what we did with the Sanbi, even if there are bigger fish to fry. If you don't do it, Itachi and whoever he has with him are still going to tear apart whoever they find to get to the Sanbi. At least if you tell me, there's a chance we can stop them. You've got 10 seconds. She wasn't banking on 6 random Konoha ninjas to do a damn thing to stop a man that destroyed the most famous clan in the ninja world on his own. But if Naruto did indeed let her go once she told him, as he claimed that he would, she would have a chance to get there before Akatsuki did and warn everyone that Orochimaru's sworn enemies were on their way. There was a chance to salvage this. And if he lied, it wouldn't matter anymore anyway, because she would be left to drown and die. It wouldn't be her problem. Fine. Gurren shouted loudly as she tried to lift her neck to keep water from getting into her mouth before she was done speaking. We don't just know where the Sanbi is, we have the Sanbi in our possession, inside of a Jinchuriki that we made. That's who they're going for. Now let me go. Gurren said just as the water rose high enough to cover her mouth and begin getting into her nose. All of a sudden she was able to flail her arms and legs around and stand up as the wooden stockade that held her was sliced clean through. She stood up in the now waist-deep water only to see a puff of smoke as a sign that Naruto's clone was gone. End flashback. You let her go? Ino asked with a twitching eye after Naruto had recanted to the lot of them what his clone had done. Are you insane? After all the work we did to capture her, you let her go? Naruto backed away from the angry Yamanaka with his hands held up defensively. Ino, chill out. It was either let her go and find out what Akatsuki are here planning, or leave her to die and find out nothing. My clone made a judgment call. That did little to soothe the savage beast behind Ino's eyes, though. I had a good reason. I like it actually. Ah said with a thoughtful look on his experienced face. Yeah, if he hadn't let her go, Akatsuki would have gotten the full drop on the Oto base once they found the correct southern island. But now, even if they find it, I can almost be sure that this Gurren will beat them back and she'll warn them of the Akatsuki approach. That's the more pressing threat. Asuma put a hand on Ino's shoulder to stop her advance on Naruto, who had his hands up prepared to defend himself. I see good reasons too. If it was an ambush, Akatsuki would flatten them in short order and leave with a Biju to further their plans. That would just get them to turn their attention on trying to catch Naruto that much sooner. But this way, if Gurren gets back and warns them, they'll have to fight a full-on battle against an entire base and a pissed-off Jinchuriki to boot. Shikamaru nodded and finished his sensei's thought for him, and since we have to find this place anyway, we can not only use the battle as a way to find the base easier, we can use the confusion from the battle to get closer without a fuss. For as long as the battle lasted anyway. It depended on just how strong Akatsuki members were and if they could live up to the hype. This is actually really good if we do it right. Looking into Ino's eyes to check for mounting danger, Naruto calmed down when he found nothing of the sort any longer. Thank goodness, see? Judgment call. Not bad for a decision made by a chakra entity in the span of under a minute as far as he was concerned. Without saying anything else, all looked over at the Mizukage and noted the gleam in her eye as she nodded almost unnoticeably. This was a better situation than they had ever expected. It was by far the best opening they had to get at Oto since they gained their foothold in Mizu no Kuni for several reasons. The rest of the mission specifics were hammered out in short order now that all of this had been presented. Yamato's squad would gather reconnaissance with Haku as a guide and Suijutsu as good faith support. Kiri would provide transport to the southern islands of the Mizu no Kuni border area, and once the location of the enemy was found they would mark the coordinates and send immediate word to Kiri, who would have Umbu at the ready to send in under the radar of the other countries in case that was still an issue. Of course there was something else important that had been dictated to both Haku and Suijutsu. Both of them had a secondary mission if the opportunity presented itself that they were to keep to themselves, to capture the Sanba Jinchuriki that had been made by Oto and bring him/her to the village. The Umbu sent out after the position was confirmed would provide assistance if there was a need. At a time when Kiri was building its strength back up from the damage incurred from the civil war, it was a possible deterrent and wartime resource that they had been forced to cover up losing after Yagura's disappearance. A military asset of that sort could not be overlooked as important to the village. Ocean south of Mizu no Kuni mainland island. I can beat them there. Gurren screamed to herself in her mind. After making tons of ground on land, when she finally reached the sea, she sped up her travel time by surrounding herself in a ring of crystal that she moved like a wheel. If I can just make it back first. Itachi had managed to get the location out of her verbally via his genjutsu, complete with landmarks to help him find it, but without someone that knew the country like the back of their hand it would take him a long time to traverse the multiple islands and find the right one. None of them were named, and all of the maps of that portion of the region were generalized and not exact due to the difficulty in doing so. Even with someone that did know the area, without someone that could lead him straight to the island, and that could only be someone that knew of the location of the Oto base by heart, it would still take a fair amount of time to find it. She knew exactly where to go, not just a general area. Yukimaru is going to be Orochimaru-sama's future body, and I can't let him be lost to those bastards. They only had a 5-minute head start on her at best. It would take her another day to get there, but since she had practice in getting to the rather complex location, conventional logic would say that she would make it first. Gurren threw even more effort behind her speed transport and pushed herself along faster than before as she cut a path through the water. This wasn't over yet. Her master's ambitions were worth her life. Konohagaku no Sato, Team 7 Training Ground. An S-rank mission. Sakura said to herself in a somewhat worried manner as she sat by the training posts that marked the site of her squad's final exam under their Jonin leader years ago. Ino Pig really doesn't know how to ease back into active duty, does she? And all the way to Kirigakure to boot. That was much too far to request any kind of backup from Konoha. Sitting on the ground in front of her was a slightly scuffed-up Chuji, allowing Sakura to practice her medical techniques on him and simultaneously patch him up before their monthly exercise against their old sensei. It had been something that Team 7 set up after all of them were finally promoted to Chunin. They would meet up at least once a month if nothing else than to take on Kakashi and measure their growth. He was late as usual, thus Chuji had gotten in a bit of training beforehand and wished to be in top form when the time came. Chuji was now much more robust physique-wise than he had been when he was younger. His hair was now longer and spikier down his back, he wore his headband normally around his forehead, and he wore a red suit with armor plating on his torso, arms, and legs with the kanji for food emblazoned right across his chest and stomach. Oh come on, you know how much she hated working TNI. She probably jumped at it. And with Naruto there too, I don't think Shika had a chance to turn it down. It wasn't like he'd fight too hard to do it anyway. Hey, how much stronger is Shikamaru these days anyway? Sakura asked her large teammate. I know you two kept in contact with letters sometimes while he and Naruto were gone, and you hung out all day the day after he got back. Yes, she was curious. Who wouldn't be? He had been a guardian ninja, and his lazy attitude hadn't gotten him or the daimyo killed. That had to mean major strides were made. He's alright, I guess. That wasn't the answer she was looking for. Luckily the green chakra surrounding her hands didn't slip after hearing it. We didn't talk too much about that stuff. I don't have to ask him about it to know that he's stronger. Shikamaru might be lazy, but he's not that kind of guy. Who's on an S-rank mission? Is Kakashi on one? Sakura looked ahead and her face lit up at the person that strolled into the field, Sasuke-kun. Some old habits died hard, but her voice wasn't that loud when she saw him. Chuji didn't even cringe, which meant that it wasn't so grating. Oh, no one here. Ino-chan got sent on one with Asuma-sensei and her team. I think Anko-sensei went too, but no one can say what mission it was. As time passed, Sasuke was now adorned in a gray high-collared t-shirt with his clan crest on the back and dark blue pants with a blue cloth wrapped around his waist like a belt. On his back he carried a steel Gunbei war fan half his size. I'm assuming that when you say her team you mean Shikamaru and the dumbass. A small smile placed itself onto his face. They'll be fine. The Guardian Ninja group is supposed to be a team of outright killers, and if they're back to even take an S-rank mission that means something by itself. You just want to fight Naruto again. Chuji interjected, if only to get a rise out of Sasuke as he stood up with a grunt. You two are weird like that. It's like you're the measuring stick for each other or something. You've never had a finish since we graduated. With Chuji mended to the point where he was once again fighting fit, Sakura placed her hands on her hips and looked around with a scowl. Where is Kakashi-sensei? He'd better not be ducking out again after we beat him up so bad last time. Sasuke just rolled his eyes at his teacher's perennial tardiness and Chuji's previous comment. Of course he wanted to fight Naruto again. It was a magnificent way to see how strong he was. So what? Having a rival was the best way to mark his progress as he continued to prepare for his eventual day of reckoning against Itachi. And speaking of marking his progress, I want to fight Kakashi by myself today. You two sit back since I know you don't like fighting anyway. To beat a master of the Sharingan one needed to practice against one, and since there were no other Uchiha clan members around, Kakashi was the best he'd have in that regard. Not a chance, Sasuke. We're supposed to fight as a team, Sasuke-kun. There's no reason to do that. That was the expected answer. Oh well, he'd have to somehow corner Kakashi later and set up a one-on-one match sometime later. He had to be ready anytime now. For all he knew, Itachi could be just about anywhere. As he thought about this, from the corner of his eye he caught a small black field mouse scurrying away, getting him to narrow his eyes. Southern island border of Mizu no Kuni. You're so lucky you're with someone that knows these waters like the back of his hand, Itachi-san. Kisame said as the two of them walked on an island that could be crudely described by Kisame as a big-ass rock with trees on it. You'd be searching these islands for days before you found anything. He seemed proud of that fact, or something like that. Itachi wasn't going to comment on it though. There was a time and a place for everything, and it wasn't the time to one-up his partner with a snarky comment. No, he was paying attention to their surroundings. They were in the belly of the enemy now, and he knew it. Both of them did, but they both had different ways of doing things. In situations like this, Kisame would get more excited and expectant for the battle to begin. Itachi would be hypersensitive to everything around him and would clam up, even more so than usual. Without warning, they both came to a stop in the stillness of the forest. Kisame slung his bandaged sword down from his back and slammed it on the ground. Go on ahead, Itachi-san. I've got this. He said with a wide grin, something like this won't tire me out. Itachi didn't even turn to look Kisame's way, still looking straight ahead in the path that they were traveling. If you're certain, Kisame, then you can take him on alone. He was as cool as a cucumber, while Kisame seemed to be getting even more riled up once Itachi seemed to be clearing him for action. I will locate the sandbridge in Churiki in the meantime. At that utterance, A single indistinguishable projectile flew into the air overhead and exploded before dropping down countless tiny white daggers from the sky that fell quickly and with accuracy enough to avoid the trees and hit nothing but visible ground. Mutlipple blades impaled Itachi, seemingly annihilating him before he broke up into multiple crows that flew away, distinguishing himself as a clone. Kisame was real though. He held up his sword that covered his entire body and blocked the ambush before lowering it with a grin on his face. "You're a vicious one, aren't you?" he asked in an excited tone of voice. "Got to try harder than that though." That Itachi was a sly one. If he hadn't known the man, he might not have noticed the moment when he switched himself out with a clone. Smooth. Out from the forest walked Kimimaro with his shirt already set down and ready for battle, sharp bones already extending out of his torso. "I'm aware of both of you, and I hope that you don't think I should fear you because of that. If that is your hope, I'm afraid that you are to be sorely disappointed. No. It's better this way," the blue-skinned man admitted openly as some of the bandages on his sword fell away to reveal the scales beneath it. "When they're scared they don't really fight. But with the fact that Orochimaru has you so turned around, you're going to throw your life away against me, and the fact that Itachi's going off to do something that might cause him to work a bit, I've got all the quality time I need to enjoy this battle all the way through." "You're mistaken," Kimimaro said as long sharp bones extended from his palms, elbows, shoulders, feet, and knees. "Your reputation has you so turned around you're going to throw your life away against me, monster of the mist. Yanagi no Mai, Dance of the Willow. A close-range opponent? This really was Kisame's day. He could almost laugh at his good fortune. And against one of Kirigaku's ultimate clan of war during its previously embattled past to boot. The Shikatsumayaku of the Kaguya clan. Kimimaro dashed at Kisame suddenly, and without missing a beat Kisame shifted his sword to block him before he could get close. In a blindingly surprising show of agility even for a ninja, Kimimaro stepped one foot on the blade of Kisame's sword and propelled himself into a backflip, the bone extending from his foot being used to cut or stab through his face. Kisame leaned back out of the way of the attack, barely keeping his nose from being torn from his face as he simultaneously lifted his sword for an upward swing, but that missed the nimble Kimimaro in return, who landed on the ground and spun away like a spiky top before coming to a stop in a strange ready stance prepared for round 2. "Feh. Nice taijutsu. It's a little busy though, isn't it?" Kisame said as he stripped the rest of the bandages away from his powerful sword. "Sure, it's technically magnificent. I mean, you know how to not trip over your own feet and all, but I doubt you can keep that up for as long as you need to. Eventually I am going to land something and then you'll be like wounded prey in the water." In response, Kimimaro just extended his visible bones even farther. Kisame was going to find it quite difficult to wound someone like Kimimaro in the conventional manner. Foolish. Itachi said to himself as he left dozens of Otogaku ninjas littering the branches and the ground all around him. He looked like he hadn't broken a sweat to handle them, but then again he never seemed to. But then again Orochimaru has a penchant for attracting that sort to his cause. They had broken off from Kimimaro's command to try and prevent him from reaching their base. The enemy had admittedly been better prepared for his genjutsu approach this time around, probably due to his letting the last batch live, but in the end it hadn't taken too much actual effort to defeat them. He swore that Kisame's Samehada had sensed a more powerful presence amongst the group that had broken off to fight him. But if he, whoever it was, wasn't going to double-team Kisame along with Kimimaro, it wasn't important. And that didn't seem to be the case. He had more than ample amounts of chakra left to subdue Yukimaru when he came across him. A new Jinchuriki ki was raw and unpredictable, but that was what Genjutsu was for, to neutralize the brute force of an adversary. Since the entire island's location was subtle and discreet, Itachi felt that he could understand why the entrance to the base itself was a gigantic stone snake's mouth. Knowing Kisame, he was probably going to take his time with Kimimaro since he had been given the green light to fight an enemy like that to a finish for the first time in quite a while. It was fine though. Itachi didn't need his help for something like this anyway. If history was anything to go by, he was going to be there for a while. That was good. Time was exactly what he needed to get what he wanted out of this mission. He was going to take his sweet time and wait for everything to line up in his favor. No rush whatsoever as he slowly walked inside of the base without fear. As he did so, from underneath one of the bushes and trees concealing everything from view on the island, A small toad hopped out and back underneath cover elsewhere outside. Elsewhere on the island. A successful enemy stronghold infiltration from this end. Even though Ino seemed to be boring a hole in the back of Anko's head with a glare that could probably weather solid rock, the higher-ranking ninja didn't seem to care too much. Alright, we're in. Hopefully everyone else made it on as well and we're getting some good dirt. She said quietly and in good spirits. Ino on the other hand was not. Successful infiltration or not, you put my body in a snake's belly while I was off in a bird making sure that this island was safe, without my consent. Do you have any idea how gross that was to wake up to? Yes, princess, I realize that. It's why I didn't get your consent before I did it. It was the easiest way on. We weren't seen, and even if we had been, who's going to think a snake is suspicious on an Oto-held island? Not the point. Anko just rolled her eyes as the two continued to move through a stony cliffed area of the island. There was a steep waterfall nearby that dropped directly into the rocky ocean, and they had been checking around there because a waterfall was a good place to hide an entrance or emergency exit. As they gathered intel, they needed to make sure all bases were covered for the eventual attack that they were compounding info for. Don't be so sensitive. Anko continued with a grin mounting on her face. You work in the TNI department. I'm sure you've done nastier things than ride in a snake's mouth. And I'm sure you want to do nastier things with dash dot. I swear if you finish that sentence with what I think you're going to say, I'll take over your body and make you walk through Konoha naked. Ino threatened. And even though it silenced Anko for the time being, it didn't pull the grin from her face. Honestly. You people. And whose business is it anyway? Dash. A hand held up by Anko as she froze in place stopped Ino completely. What's the matter? Instead of answering at first, Anko grabbed at the cursed seal on her neck and turned toward the forest that was near them. Something that feels familiar is coming this way. She didn't know how she figured that. She wasn't a censor, and no noise was being made. She just knew, not the good kind of familiar either. Hide now. Both did just that, and it only took another minute or so until a very large young man with wild orange hair strode out of the forest with a small bird on his finger. He walked around aimlessly as if he was searching for something before holding the bird up to his face to speak to it as it chirped to him. The people around when you lost control of your body are somewhere here, aren't they? Jugo's eyes looked around until he seemed satisfied despite the fact that there was nothing in sight. Yes, I can feel the presence of one of my copies nearby, a strong design. My influence is suppressed though. The bird flew off of Jugo's finger and in the next second his expression turned murderous. His right arm transformed into an ugly, bulky, and gray form with a piston at the elbow that he punched into the ground hard enough to shatter the rock. His piston snapped down simultaneously and drove a crack that trailed straight to the edge of the cliff. Before it made it there and broke the cliff edge off, both Anko and Ino made it back over. Having chosen over the edge of the cliff as their hiding place, they found having to fight a far better alternative than getting dashed against the rocks in the ocean via a rock slide. Upon making it over, Anko stopped and stared at Jugo. His body looked a bit like those afflicted with the cursed seal, only more stable and natural. What the hell is this? She heard him call her his copy. What did that mean though? And why did he look so pissed off? This isn't good, is it? Ino asked aloud, holding up her hands in position to fire her consciousness at the first opportunity it presented itself. Omaka, Guardian Days 4. 8 months after Naruto and Shikamaru's acceptance. Kid, I like drinking in the dark as much as the next person. Jiraiya started to say before he did just as he had been talking about and downed some of his adult beverage as he sat next to Naruto from their place in the corner of a dimly lit bar. But if you're going to spend your 2 weeks off drinking, you should do it in a gentleman's establishment so we can hang out around some women. Naruto sat at the table with his head down in his arms as he scrutinized the entrance of the bar with a snort. Drinking? I'm 14. This was said with a lit cigarette hanging idly out of his mouth. I'm here for training. Jiraiya looked around at their surroundings and shrugged. A dingy bar at the northwestern border of Hinokuni where organized gaming and the acts of the debaucherous reigned supreme. In all actuality it was his kind of place, but some training. You're going to have to stop getting your ideas for vacation spots from Tsunade Hime. What are you here to train? Your tolerance for alcohol. Really, because we can do that if you want. Anything else that could or would be said was prevented when Naruto saw his target person come through the door of the bar, looking around for something, not that kind of training Aro-sensei. With that he got up and Jiraiya's head almost popped out of his head when he saw Naruto get up and go toward this new person. His 14-year-old brat of an apprentice was walking up to the cutest damn thing in that bar, which admittedly wasn't saying much considering who was in there, but in this case it was. Tanned skin, mint green hair, and a lithe-built little body that fit with the somewhat revealing white clothes she wore. And she was at least 3 or 4 years older than him. Shoot for the stars. Go brat go. Jiraiya loudly hissed under his breath as he watched Naruto walk on over to the girl across the bar. This is the kind of training he was talking about and he didn't even ask me for pointers? I don't know whether to feel proud or slighted that he didn't ask me for advice. The two seemingly talked for a bit before Naruto grinned widely and wrapped the girl up in a hug. Jiraiya then cringed when Naruto got flung by the girl hard enough to fly into the bartender's counter, too forward. The rest of the bar cared for about 5 seconds and went back to drinking the afternoon away. Jiraiya figured that at least the girl didn't punch him hard enough to nearly rip his head off of his shoulders like Tsunade. Goodness, were all kunoichi getting stronger like that or what? Jiraiya unconsciously cracked his neck just thinking about it. Laying upside down, all sorts of askew, Naruto saw an inverted view of Fu walking toward him. You got one of those for helping me earlier this year. Fu said, hands on her hips as she walked over to the stunned Naruto. One does not mean hug me once every time you see me. It means once in a lifetime or you get flung to the moon. Naruto coughed and stood up with a rubber-legged effect to his stance before he got his feet back under him. Nice to see you too, Fu. Did you make it here all right? Just fine. She said, dusting him off as he got his awareness back under him. It's a way easier trip for me than it is for you, Mr. Guardian Ninja. Getting a letter like that from him was certainly a surprise. So how much time do you have to train? A week and a half left. It was supposed to be 2 weeks but it took a few days to get here. Naruto said as he shook any possible dirt off of his guardian sash and adjusted his goggles on his forehead. How's that work for you? Think you can teach me some Jinchuriki tricks? A frown was evident on Fu's face, but she just waved it off. It was basically supposed to be a crash course with her throwing as much at him as she thought would stick in short order. That's not enough time for you to get anything concrete down, but I guess we can get started and you can have some exercises down to do on your own. She gestured toward the door and started leaving. Come on Naruto, let's go make a serviceable Jinchuriki out of you. Over where he was sitting, Jiraiya heard the girl say that she was going to make a underscore out of Naruto, but didn't hear quite what she said from his eavesdropping. When Naruto left with her and turned back to him to give him a thumbs up, the universal sign for don't wait up, Jiraiya fell out in the floor and almost had a heart attack on the spot. No way. He wheezed out, impossible. I haven't been surpassed yet. Chapter 49, Blood in the Water. Never again. Suigetsu hissed at Naruto quietly in the dingy light of the Otagakure base that he, Naruto, and Haku were all inside of. Don't you ever make me do something like that again. That was completely gross. They had managed to infiltrate the island after breaking off from the others via the inside of one of Naruto's toads. Shut up. Naruto replied, gesturing to Haku. She was cool with it, and consider it payback for trying to attack me when we first met, you jerk. Honestly, he had a toad jutsu that could obstruct their chakra from within and protect them from being detected, and Suigetsu was more concerned with how nasty it was. You shouldn't treat animals like that either, man, that's cruel. I'm sure it was uncomfortable. That's what he's meant to do. And I give the toads stuff all the time out of gratitude. Haku shushed both of them before they could continue arguing any further. Focus was needed because they were deep in the belly of the enemy now. It was surprising that they hadn't run into any enemies yet, since the last one of these that had been discovered by Kiri had been teeming with bad guys, but as much as she didn't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, it would have been pure negligence not to. What should we do from here on out? Haku asked her current teammates as they moved through the halls. Naruto-kun, can you feel any life in here? A frowning Naruto shook his head. Not a chance. Too many walls in the way to get a feeling past a few feet. Maybe if I had to feel something behind a wall in a room right next to me, but it's like an anthill down here, just a bunch of tunnels. The sonar effect of his sensory jutsu was affected by walls. Real smooth Konoha kid. I will suplex you on your head. Naruto said to Suijutsu following his remark until they came to multiple splits in an open corridor. What was with the whole labyrinth thing that this place had going on? Did they set this place up to travel underneath the whole island? 4 directions. 1 to the prisons, 1 to the barracks, 1 to the labs, 1 back the way they came. And Uchiha Itachi had gone down one of these paths because Naruto's toad had seen that he had beaten them there. And since he hadn't ambushed them yet, it was the only option. Okay. With a sigh, Naruto crouched down to one knee on the ground to take a minute to think. It was a different style, but it was a little something he had inherited from working with Shikamaru so much and watching him stop in the middle of a mission to plan. How long did you say it would be until your message gets to those Umbu waiting on us? According to what Haku and Suijutsu had told the team on the way there, the Umbu that the Mizukage dispatched to support them would have to remain in definite Mizu no Kuni lands until they were summoned, as Umbu couldn't be risked being discovered in disputed territories like the southern islands. The moment their boat came into view of the appropriate island, Haku sent off a messenger hawk that they had taken with them. That had been 30 minutes ago, another hour until the strike force arrives, I believe. Haku informed Naruto, knowing how fast the hawk she had taken for the mission was. I don't think we should hold up and wait though. Because their secondary mission deemed that they had to return with the Jinchuriki key of the Sanbi. If they waited, they would probably miss their window to obtain him before Akatsuki did. Well, then we'll have to search to make sure we can trap these guys in here. Suijutsu said, taking Kubikari Boucha from his back and pointing down one of the pathways. We'll look down these things one by one, but someone needs to stay here because I think this is a good choke point. Naruto was about to suggest using clones to sweep the area, but realized that in a close quarters environment like this his clones wouldn't do too well without space to move around and avoid being damaged. And trying to fix that by sending them in en masse would only end terribly. If she were here, Gurren would cut a swatch straight through them with her crystal release without even having to try, and Itachi would only have to fire one decently sized fireball down a tunnel and he'd wipe them all out. As far as he knew, between both Haku and Suijutsu's abilities they could deal with the flames, and if they were weak they'd have never been dispatched to do this mission. He'd have to trust in his comrades to handle themselves. I don't like the idea of splitting everybody up more than we already are, but an hour's too long to wait for backup. Naruto stood back up and shook his head. Okay. You guys can check these 3 tunnels one by one, I'll keep this spot locked down. Holler if you're about to die. Suijutsu quipped as he and Haku took off running down the path leading to the barracks. We'll be right back if we get wind of something. As they left him behind, Naruto let out a sigh and decided to try and find a place to hide and get the drop on anyone that might wind up coming his way, just in case. People from Kirigakure are weird. Elsewhere on the island, Kimimaro vs. Kisame. Hold still, punk. Kisame demanded as Kimimaro seemed to dodge every swing of Samehada, even in some of the most inescapable positions. It wasn't just a matter of speed, despite the fact that Kimimaro really was that much faster than he was. It was the general flexibility that the abnormal body possessed by the Oto ninja that made him so hard to make contact with. Damn taijutsu virtuosos. The way Kimimaro was dodging was incredible. It seemed as if he didn't even have a spine at times, because that was the way he had to bend himself from time to time to avoid being cut into 2. But he wasn't long enough to take advantage of this and respond by stabbing or slashing at the blue-skinned man with the bones sticking out all over his body. The length that Samehada gave Kisame in terms of his attacks was simply staggering. Kimimaro backflipped on his hands out of range of one of Kisame's attacks and pointed his hand at him fingers first. Teshi Senden, 10-finger drilling bullets. From his fingertips flew small bone projectiles with the consistency of metal. He was using only one hand instead of 2. But there was a murderous rate of fire being sent out Kisame's way, uncountable as bones were being replaced and shot out. Samehada was set down straight up on the ground and fed chakra straight from Kisame's body, shirking off some of the bandages that covered it, allowing more scales to show through. It grew a bit, allowing Kisame to take refuge behind it to protect him from being shot and riddled with bone bullets by Kimimaro. Heh, I can't tell whether I hate this guy or I like him, he said while holding onto a snake hand seal to build his chakra properly for his next move. From his slight distance away where he was trying to slowly move around Samehada to target Kisame, Kimimaro still had his one hand outstretched to fire at the nearest availability to gun his foe down. It doesn't matter what other people in the world seem to believe you to be. Even if someone like you is perceived as S-rank, all that makes you to me is S-ranked trash. And when it came to dealing with the trash of the shinobi world, Kimimaro would count no one better than him in that department. Suten, Bakuzui Shao water release, exploding water colliding wave. Kisame turned his head from around the cover provided to him by his trusty sword and opened his mouth to let loose a torrent of water as if someone had just opened a set of floodgates. A massive wave started advancing toward Kimimaro, who found that he couldn't outrun it and wound up being swept off of his feet as Kisame seemed to ride the current. The engulfed Kimimaro was left a sitting duck as Kisame passed near him. With a chuckle and a massive grunt of effort, Kisame finally managed to strike heavily at Kimimaro and slashed at him repeatedly in the water before he was carried past him by the water. Finally got you. Your fancy little moves don't work when you can't even stand on your own 2 feet, do they? Much to Kisame's displeasure, however, Kimimaro's lifeless body didn't float up to the surface of the newly made lake. He climbed out and stood on the surface of the water, clothes shredded to tatters and flesh rendered to the same state via the scales on Samehada. While he was a bloody mess, underneath the surface of his flesh there was a white shell. Oh. Kisame said, seemingly annoyed by what he saw, that's right. That Demkaguya Kekai Genkai lets you do anything with bones. Even create an armor of bone beneath his skin. That was going to make him annoying to kill. Thank goodness it was a rarity even within Kimimaro's lineage. Yeah, I'm from Kiri, I should have thought about that. In his defense though, Kimimaro was the only one that had been noted to have it in well over a decade. That's not to say that he wasn't up for the challenge though. He was quite certain that if it came down to it he could make that young man's body break somehow, and if all else failed he had never heard of a tough skeleton keeping someone from drowning. From Kimimaro's point of view though, things had taken a turn for the negative. With all of this water around, Kisame's repertoire of techniques available to him doubled. Even so he would not be deterred. This battle was far from unwinnable. You think transforming our area of battle to your liking puts you at that much of an advantage, do you? Kimimaro asked, casting away the remnants of his shirt, leaving his mangled upper body bare. You underestimate my power. Cruelly smirking in return, Kisame gestured for Kimimaro to come toward him with his hand. Come show me then, boy, or are you just mostly talk like your master was? From the small seal mark on his clavicle, black marks began to spread all across Kimimaro's body as he glared hatefully at Kisame. A worthless, traitorous brute such as yourself would know nothing of the things that Orochimaru-sama desires to achieve. One day he will crush you Akatsuki fools, and with the very power that you seek for yourselves. And he was going to be right there by his side, leading the way and drenching the path in the blood of his master's enemies. Kisame opened his mouth to make a snide remark, but when Kimimaro moved, whatever he had to say died in his throat as he had to block a thunderous kick from Kimimaro that sent him sliding back across the surface of the water. So this was what those freaky seals that Orochimaru's top pawns possessed did to them? Interesting. That chakra seemed to be getting Samehada a bit excited. Well, he would simply have to indulge it then. He didn't have much time to ponder, however, when Kimimaro didn't let just one kick be the end of things. As Kisame slid back, Kimimaro ran and kept pace alongside him, sharp bones extended from his torso and legs as he began to spin like a top once he moved past the sword that Kisame had just used to block his first kick. Samehada automatically bent itself to protect Kisame's side, but Kimimaro nimbly jumped directly over the weapon trying to defend its wielder and delivered a brutal kick directly to Kisame's face that sent him skipping across the surface of the water like a stone on a pond. Do the world a favor and die. Kimimaro said coldly as he pursued his adversary's body to follow up on his opening. Kisame flipped himself back upright, and as the entire time he had been making hand seals while flying away. The second he got back on his feet he finished his last two and slammed palm on the ground. Suten, Amsuakau Urha, water release, rainwater shark wave. He slapped a large amount of water into the air that fell and formed into multiple small sharks for an aerial bombardment. Not willing to hang back any, Kimimaro destroyed the sharks with rapid-fire shots of his finger bullets, but had to cover up as best he could when he realized that even when destroyed he simply couldn't directly move through this attack. The water droplets formed from the destroyed sharks fell onto him and cut at his flesh like tiny blades. Still moving forward, unwilling to let his advantage fade, Kimimaro put his arms down from his face just in time to see Samehada incoming from above that he then had to take while holding his forearms up as a method of flimsy protection. Kisame slammed Samehada down on Kimimaro with a jumping overhand slash that drove up a splash 15 feet high. His body probably cratered the floor that was only 20 feet down. No way you're dancing your way out of this one, Twinkle Toes. Suten, Sukouden no Jutsu, Water Release, Water Shark Bullet Jutsu. In the water a shark was formed from part of the lake that went down after Kimimaro. Beneath the waves Kisame could see his shark snatching up something and chewing away on it, thrashing it around and maiming it in its powerful jaws. No matter how strong someone's body was, good luck standing up to a shark's bite. But as the jutsu-comprised shark dissipated, there was no blood where the body was starting to drop to the lake floor. And why wasn't it floating to the surface? No. It couldn't be a tangible clone that he replaced himself with. Clones were supposed to dispel when taking a certain amount of damage, and how much more damage could you deal someone than having a shark go to town on them? Feeling a presence behind him due to Samehada's ability to feel the intense chakra radiating from the cursed seal, Kisame turned around to see Kimimaro rise from the water, completely unharmed, with his attack attempt neutralized due to being felt. What in the world was that? You keep corpses on you just to substitute. That was no dead body. Kimimaro stated cryptically. A confused Kisame stared at him until he felt something grab him around the ankles. Looking down he saw two pairs of bony hands holding onto his legs, leaving him a sitting duck. Now that the figure was closer and more visible, it was apparent that his shark had attacked a skeleton. Kimimaro's skeleton to be exact. And there had been another one down there. That had to be the freakiest thing ever. A true skeleton, animated by Kimimaro's chakra and toughened by his Kekai Genkai to the durability of steel. You are the sickest kid I've ever dashed. Kisame started to state dryly before he was dragged underwater by Kimimaro's skeleton and wrapped up tightly, leaving Samehada floating on the surface. A scoff came from Kimimaro as he made to leave before noticing Samehada. He slowly walked over to it and picked it up by the handle before spikes jutted out of the grip and tried to impale his hand, only managing to break the skin. The real threat though was the fact that it was trying to suck out his chakra, and Kimimaro threw away the wretched weapon as if he were touching nothing but filth. He planned on bringing that weapon into the Oto fold as a gift for Orochimaru, but if it was really that picky about its users to the point that it wouldn't even let him hold it, then it was worthless to them. Besides, it would have to choose a new wielder soon enough because even though Kisame looked like a fish, he was still a man, and being held down by his animated skeletons that were just as strong as him, he would drown before they ran out of the chakra that allowed them to move. Underneath the water, Kisame grew angrier and angrier as he tried to struggle against Kimimaro's clones trying to keep their death holds on him. He couldn't move his hands to make any hand seals, and even if he could, there wasn't anything down there that he could substitute himself with. They had managed to drag him to the bottom of the lake that he himself had created due to the sheer density of their bone structure, weighing him down with how they had his arms and legs bound. To hell with this crap. These things were allowed to move due to the visible chakra running through them. Well, he didn't need Samehada to absorb chakra. All he needed was a water source and contact. He had both. Pulling the chakra straight out of Kimimaro's skeletons, they fell uselessly to the side and freed him up, the little shit. Kimimaro had already started walking away as if he had been leaving Kisame for dead. That upset him like nothing else. Who did he think he was? With that in mind, underwater Kisame decided to roll through hand seals and show Kimimaro just how dead he was. Suten, Daibakufu no Jutsu, Water Release, Great Waterfall Jutsu. Now back on regular land again after leaving Kisame behind to die, Kimimaro was thoroughly on his way back to the hidden base to take care of Itachi before he got there, but stopped and turned around when he heard the sound of crashing water weaving its way through the trees. Without saying another word, he turned and ran away from the sound as fast as he could as a massive wave came his way, high enough to break some of the flimsier trees up at their heights. Even with his best efforts, there wasn't going to be any outrunning that water once it decided to descend and crash down the way it looked like it was going to, and Kimimaro knew it. But he didn't have to run that far. At the risk of dead-ending himself, Kimimaro ran towards a cliff wall with a small fissure in the rock. A death trap in a situation like this, as once the water hit it, it simply pushed on through. He ran until he finally reached a small opening in the ground and slid for home, depositing himself inside before he could be effectively smashed to oblivion by the raging waves against the rocks and the cliff walls around him. Asuma, Shikamaru, and Yamato were all thoroughly soaked and panting heavily at what they had just managed to avoid, thanks in part to some quick thinking and the special abilities of Yamato. When a wave began pouring through the forest they were getting recon on, the Mokuton saved their collective asses and allowed them to ride it out. What the hell just happened? Asuma asked, a bit bewildered at what he had just dealt with. There hadn't been any warning or anything. Who had discovered them? They had been very quiet as they moved along and hadn't come across a hostile soul yet. Shikamaru spit out a good amount of water and dragged a hand down his drenched face with a scowl, replacing it afterwards. I don't know why you're asking us. We were right here with you the whole time. No one else saw anything you didn't, Asuma. Taking note of the fact that the team was alright, Yamato just shook his head at Asuma, beginning to bemoan the loss of the pack of cigarettes he had stashed in the pocket of his flak jacket. There's a chance that one of the other teams were discovered and that was an attack from that battle. Or, Shikamaru said in return, maybe Akatsuki is already here? Naruto said that they were supposed to be on the way too, just like we were. He should have stayed on the ship. But then again, his friends were there and his sensei was too. No way he'd let them walk onto that rock of doom without him, so what's the call, Taijo? Yamato already had a plan of action, as they were only meant to observe and report to the Kiriumbu team when they finally arrived within the hour, but he heard the splitting of a tree over in the direction that the wave had come from and turned that way to see something fast coming their way. Scatter. Through the trees there was a path being made that seemed to be turning the ground into some kind of fluid, making it easy for whatever was inside of it to pass through it and toward the Konoha group quickly, as if it cutting straight through. Appropriate because Samehada was sticking out of the ground like a shark fin sticking out of the ocean as it moved inside of the jutsu. After getting close enough, Kisame burst from the ground up at the evading Yamato, spinning like a top and intending to slash through him had Yamato not been quick to act with 3 hand seals that he had prepared the moment he became aware of the threat. Moku Bunshin no Jutsu, Wood Clone Jutsu. A wooden dummy emerged from Yamato's body in front of him and was then rendered to splinters by the attack of Kisame. But that was what it had been meant for the entire time, so that Yamato could get himself farther away from their new assailant. Heh. Kisame looked around at Yamato, Shikamaru, and Asuma, who were all ready to fight in their own particular ways. Well, I was looking for some Oto punk that tried to cut loose from me before we were done, but when Samehada started searching for him, you guys were what we felt closest. The scales on the massive sword twitched and Kisame looked over at Yamato. Samehada really likes the cut of your chakra, friend. All of them took note of the red clouds on Kisame's black cloak, and all of them knew of Kisame's description from the bingo books. It was obvious to anyone ninja savvy who he was. He didn't have features that were hard to distinguish. With what stood before them, Asuma voiced the concern that all 3 of the Konoha ninjas felt at the same time. Crap. I'm not sure, but I think I'd rather have to fight Uchiha Itachi. Shikamaru commented as things seemed to have slowed to a bit of a standoff. This was not a mere standoff though. While Kisame would never dazzle anyone with his general intellect, he was one of the greatest shinobi ever produced by Kirigakure, and he got to that level with an intellect molded for the battlefield. I'm facing a Nara that probably won't fight me directly, Sarutobi Asuma who could be a bit of a threat here, and Mokuton no Tenzo. Enough said. He thought about his chances for a split second before grinning sharply. I like these odds. Itachi could handle capturing the Sanbi. If Kimimaro retreated to the base, he would just wind up getting himself killed anyway. Great, so there was going to be a fight regardless. That makes one of us. Shikamaru quipped before feigning a move forward. Instead of him stepping forth, Asuma was the first to lead the way in attacking Kisame. Trench knives in hand, he was set to launch a punching attack that Kisame seemed prepared to defend against before at the last second he jumped over Asuma's head out of the way completely. Wind chakra eh? Kisame remarked as he avoided the move. Thought you could try to get me with an invisible blade at the end of those knives of yours. It would have gone right around Samehada's guard. Once his feet touched the ground, he immediately set himself after Shikamaru, best to kill of the brain first. Doton, Doryusu, Earth Release, Earth Flow Spears. Spikes shot out of the ground and diverted Kisama's path away from Shikamaru, who moved seamlessly with the opening presented to him. Making the rat seal, he quickly snaked his shadow through the spikes and wound up getting Kisame in a trapped position. Asuma moved to immediately close in for the kill the moment that Shikamaru immobilized him. It was not to be though, as Kisame stabbed the top of Samehada right into the ground to cut Shikamaru's shadow before it attached to his own. Much to Shikamaru's surprise, it actually worked, and Kisame immediately turned around and punched the attacking Asuma in the face before he could behead him. The fact that Samehada could absorb chakra wasn't exactly a mystery to those that were studious enough to know of such a dangerous man's abilities, but Shikamaru never knew that it could do such a thing to the chakra that allowed his shadow to stretch. His sword can cut through chakra-based techniques even if the chakra's been nature transformed. Asuma was floored from the shot and sent flying back from the impact of the punch. His body rolled about on the ground until he came to a stop and looked up at Kisame with a wince and a heavily swollen jaw. "Oh man. I haven't been punched like that in a long time." Gritting his teeth at their difficult enemy, Shikamaru switched his rat hand seal to a bird one and altered his shadow ninjutsu, Kagenui no Jutsu, shadow sewing jutsu. The shadow that had been cut off by Samehada warped into several sharp tendrils and sped at Kisame again to try and get an angle on him to stab into him. "No chance, kid." Kisame began dexterously fending off Shikamaru's shadow threads with Samehada. The sword managed to cut through them, but it did nothing to keep the attack from continuing, as more shadow stretched from where he had cut them. "You're not getting around my guard, and Samehada is having a good day eating your chakra like this." "Damn it." Shikamaru pulled his shadow back, looking a bit winded. He wasn't just stealing the chakra I was putting into the attack. So how was he going to detain him then? His shadow was not working here. As long as Kisame had a hold of Samehada, even if he managed to latch his shadow onto the other man's, Samehada being in his hand made the sword's shadow a part of his own. And that was basically the same as touching it. Yamato had been scrutinizing the scene near Shikamaru and noticed the look of tension on the younger man's face. "What's on your mind, Shikamaru? As long as he's got that sword, I can't get him." If Kisame could defend against his Kagenui that just outright stabbed him, and regular shadow possession didn't work, something had to change or he was no good in this battle. "There's not much I can do from here." Yamato saw Asuma get back up, ready to fight again after getting his clock cleaned just a moment ago. "Yes, there is. I believe in you, you're smart. Just watch us while we fight him. You'll find an opening. I know you will." Looking over at Shikamaru, he saw the genius glaring at him over his plan of action. "I know you hate being put in situations where someone has to get hurt for you to find an advantage, but in Umbu you don't always have the luxury of saving everyone. I know you can do it, and Asuma does too. Would it help you if I said that this was a direct order?" Troublesome. Not waiting for an actual answer, Yamato went to go and fight Kisame along with Asuma, locking eyes with his fellow Jonin to let the man know that it was time to attack. He got a grim nod in response, and both of them looked over at Shikamaru almost unnoticeably. But Shikamaru did notice, and he had to bite back a groan. He really was going to have to wait for his shot, wasn't he? With Ino and Anko. Just because her abilities dealt with the mind more often than not, this didn't mean that Ino had to be the one to deal with the crazies. But here she and Anko stood, facing off with some lunatic by themselves, by a huge cliff. "So should we, I don't know, run?" Ino said quietly to Anko nearby. Well, it was just supposed to be a reconnaissance mission. The real fighting wasn't supposed to take place at least until the Umbu team arrived from their position within Mizu no Kuni's undisputed borders. "I don't think this guy is much for letting people get away." Anko's words were then echoed when Jugo seemed to be tired of just staring at his prey and made to make his move on them. "He's a big one though, isn't he?" she asked rhetorically before both she and Ino had to separate to avoid being impaled when his right arm transformed into a bulky, grey multi-pronged spear that jutted out at them. Upon clearing Jugo's attempt to skewer them, Ino saw that the large and unstable young man was seemingly targeting Anko as his priority in this battle, at least for now. Who knew what he'd do later? But for the time being she could take advantage of that. Risking getting close enough to hit him with Shintenshin no Jutsu or Shinran's no Jutsu was a no-no for now. Not until she was certain one or the other would land, and she wasn't about to project her spirit at a time like this. Not without certainty that her actual body would be safe. but she had other avenues of attack. She just had to make sure she had a clear line that would avoid Anko first. Dakasi Tanki Shat, Toxic Spitfire. Ino shot multiple rapid-fire black balls of some sort of fluid from her mouth at Jugo. The poison projectiles missed, but the area on the ground where they hit started to melt. Damn it, how'd I miss him? He's huge. And he managed to dodge her jutsu while focusing on getting nearer and nearer to Anko. After making a pair of hand seals and jabbing out with a hand, snakes flew from inside of Anko's coat sleeve right at the advancing Jugo, Sene Jashu, hidden shadow snake hands. He merely cleaved the serpents away and kept coming toward his target, not willing to let her live any longer than it took to kill her. Die. 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 Anko meanwhile was grateful that Jugo's attacks were so slow. His right arm was now an axe and he seemed dead set on splitting her into two, but he found it quite difficult to make contact with her. Hate him or not, the simple lessons that Orochimaru taught her as a child held strong. If you get hit you die, so don't get hit. Yeah, he was the best at that. She managed to retaliate with a punch to the face to make him cease his assault, but it was like punching a rhinoceros when her fist smacked off of the gray flesh on the right side of his face. Seriously, it felt like leather and it didn't even faze him. It just left her open for the tank of a man's large axe arm to cut down on her. With no chance at moving out of the way, it was left to Ino to tackle her out of the way as the weapon split the ground. Ugh. Anko groaned as she was pulled back up to her feet. Why didn't you take him out? With a roll of her eyes, Ino set herself back at the ready to fight alongside her senior Kunoichi. Right, because stopping you from getting axed was the wrong move and all. A damn thank you would have been nice, but of course that wasn't Anko's style. Whatever. Anko said, dusting her overcoat off as best she could. We're going to need to hit him together to put this guy down. Yeah, definitely. Working in tandem would definitely take this guy down. For all of that size of his, he wasn't exactly the fastest. Many engine propulsion-like protrusions formed on Jugo's back that began building chakra before he suddenly rocketed himself directly at both Anko and Ino, plowing his entire body into them both and bulldozing them off of their feet, sending them flying toward the cliffside. Both of you die already. Both ladies slid over the edge, seemingly falling into the rocky ocean to their deaths. Just to make sure though, Jugo walked to the edge and looked down to see nothing hanging onto the side, nothing sticking to the walls on the way down. He really knocked the wind out of their sails when he plowed into them. His partial transformations faded and the killer expression on Jugo's face faded, going back to the normal and peaceful look that usually accompanied him. There was a bit of remorse in his eyes, but these people were there to try and harm Kamimaru or Yukimaru, and this was to help his friend. As unfortunate as it was that they had to die, if nothing else at least his bloodlust was sated against people that were supposed to be enemies anyway instead of against allies. Turning away from the cliff and walking back to the forest nearby, he resolved that he had to get back to the base. These were not the Akatsuki members that Gurren had warned them of, which meant that they were still at large as a threat. Jugo found his legs ensnared by a pair of hands wrapped around his large ankles, keeping him from leaving the area. Doton, Shinju Yazanshu no Jutsu, Earth Release, Double Suicide Decapitation Jutsu. While yanking Jugo underground, Anko pulled herself back above ground with Ino in tow. Both of them looked extremely ruffled from the nasty impact they suffered from Jugo's attack, Anko favoring one of her arms that she now held at her side and both breathing heavily. A confused Jugo was still wondering what happened, barely given any time at all to register his newfound lack of freedom when a needle was placed in his neck that shut his systems down in a matter of seconds. Anko looked down at Jugo as he nodded off and turned toward Ino. I was going to just break his neck, but that works too, I guess. She placed her foot on the top of his head and shook his head around. What was with this guy? Ino just shrugged in confusion and looked down at Jugo as well until things grew too silent and she realized that Anko was looking at her expectantly. What? You want me to find out? Do you know how long that could take? A smiling Anko was all the answer she needed. Fine. I should have been a medic. Not saying a word, Anko placed a hand on her neck where her seal was located. Focus on looking for memories that have to do with the cursed seals until we get summoned to meet back up with the others. I'll keep guard. Obeying the request of her superior with a nod, Ino kneeled down and placed a hand on the unconscious Jugo's head to begin sifting through his memories. At least he didn't have any blocks on his mind the way that Gurren had. This wouldn't take that long then. But due to the fact that his hands were concealed underground, neither of them noticed that only after a few seconds of being subjugated to Ino's poison, Jugo's fingers twitched. Inside of the Otogakuer base laboratory, Itachi looked through a distorted set of clean beakers placed in a row according to content size on a table. He had come to that portion of the base in order to search for the Jinchuriki key that Orochimaru had created for the Sanbei, Yukimaru. Given Orochimaru's penchant for experimentation, it wouldn't have surprised him to find the boy strapped to a table and sedated for docility. But the area was empty. The lab had samples of blood, strange machines with massive wires running from the tops of them that seemed to have chakra samples coursing through them, and many other things. However, it also seemed as if no one had been there in months. Apparently the lab was off limits to everyone other than an extremely select few. Interesting. So that had to mean that Orochimaru hadn't been there in a few months. He probably found it too bothersome to come all the way out there himself those days now that his human trafficking system was set to ferry people back to the mainland from Mizu no Kuni. There was nothing there that he could use though. Damn it, Orochimaru wasn't much for working on things that were medical. Either way, the target wasn't there. Well, the intended target wasn't there at least. Hello Naruto-kun. Itachi said, not even bothering to turn to the entrance of the open room to address the blonde Chunin standing there. He wasn't being attacked, so there wasn't much reason to attack in return. Are you certain that it was wise to come and confront me here? Naruto just remained in place where Itachi had discovered him, his goggles down over his eyes in preparation for a conflict, process of elimination. There are friends of mine checking another place in the base which left this part in the jail area, and I sent a clone that way to leave this part for myself. Why didn't you send a clone here as well? I did. It found you. I'm not going to make a clone to fight you and blow my cover. I know who you are. Itachi was amused, but one couldn't tell from the look on his face. It looked just as stony as always. I wonder why I was able to sense you and not your clone then. Naruto just shrugged in response, it doesn't matter. You are not our target here. You should wait and take your time to prepare for what will inevitably be coming your way. Was he warning him? Even so, whether he was or not, Naruto didn't want to have to hear any of that. I've been preparing for years already. Naruto said, slowly lowering himself to prepare for a fight. If I'm not ready by now, then I guess I just wasn't good enough. Admittedly though, Naruto had better ideas in the past than taking on someone like this. It doesn't matter, because when you came back the way you got here to begin with, we would have fought then. With a raised eyebrow, Itachi took Naruto's words into account before paying attention to something else. Are you looking into my eyes right now? That is a grave mistake. These lenses are special. Naruto tapped the sides of his goggles. I've done a lot of work on these for years, and put a chakra dampening seal on them, so that I could definitely kick your brother's ass when we fight again. If you suck at genjutsu, why go there? Hide it and avoid it coming into play altogether. Naruto could break them, but he hated it, and the chance of getting stuck in one from mere eye contact was a pain that he just didn't need. Luckily as a kid Sasuke wasn't much for the eye tricks, but as he got older and stronger he would be, and they were still rivals that hadn't fought it out in a definite match yet, something that was still pretty important to Naruto. This was before he knew that the only other remaining Uchiha clan member alive was in Akatsuki. Now he felt like a damn prophet for modifying his eyewear. Kami knows that it took long enough to work down the necessary seal to the size it needed to be for each lens without blocking his actual vision. You're friends with Sasuke? Itachi asked, seeming actually interested in something that Naruto said for the first time since they'd met up. He got a sheepish rubbing of the back of Naruto's own neck in response, so I'd take that as a no. Hey, it was kind of complicated. Well, we are, but we don't really act like it. There had to be a word created for that kind of thing. It would help him explain it better. I mean, we have our moments. We don't hate each other, I think, but are dead set on proving that we're better than each other. Come to think of it, he hadn't seen that bastard since he'd come back to Konoha. Nodding in understanding at what Naruto was saying, Itachi deactivated his Sharingan to Naruto's confusion. I think you'll find that all Uchiha are not created alike. I fight nothing like my brother. I'm certain of it. He turned his Sharingan off. Naruto thought to himself. Damn it, he was banking on random up-close flashes of his sonar jutsu to throw Itachi off. It was the template for battling jujutsu users that he'd set up back as a kid. While it would bother a Sharingan user instead of flash-banging a Byakugan user, it was still a weapon and an advantage he had held. But not if Itachi was willing to fight him without it. You might need that to beat me. We'll see. Itachi said before he threw dozens of shuriken at Naruto, utterly shocking him with the raw hand speed displayed. It was as if his hands hadn't even moved from his side. It wasn't even enough time for Naruto to draw his machete to parry, he had to actually move and dodge the metal projectiles. What a strange weapon. Almost freezing up in sheer shock, Naruto still managed to jump as far away as he could, turning around to find Itachi at his back. That was incredible. Even Ero-sensei isn't that fast. He didn't even allow Naruto the time to muster a counter-effort after missing with his shuriken. Naruto put his hand up to take his machete from his back, but Itachi was right in his face before he even touched the handle. His hand lashed out like lightning for Naruto's neck, but Naruto's reflexes and experience with people trying to overpower him in the past allowed him to catch Itachi's wrist short of his hand grasping his throat. Naruto held tight in an iron grip that Itachi couldn't pull away from. Once more, surprising Naruto with his speed, Itachi lashed out with a kunai utilizing his free hand that Naruto had to lean back and let go to avoid. He never even saw Itachi reach for or draw the weapon, and it came before Naruto could even make a fight-ending move. Itachi managed to lash out with a kick to the chest that hit Naruto and knocked both combatants away from each other, spinning from the separate impacts before they faced off again. Finally given an opening to draw his weapon of choice, Naruto pulled out his machete and went forward to attack Itachi head-on, but when he didn't move to dodge or react, Naruto stopped his approach and leapt away just as Itachi blew up, exploding clones. Oh you bastard! He almost got too close to avoid that move. Retreating from the laboratory, Naruto made his way back down the hall and found Itachi not far behind him. Naruto let out a pulse of his sonar jutsu to make sure that Itachi had his Sharingan deactivated before jumping off of a side wall in the corridor and turning to face him after concealing his hand seals, Mogurinagare no Jutsu, Cinder Stream Jutsu. Naruto spewed a billowing cloud of hot ash from his mouth directly at Itachi, who had no way to go around the attack due to the constrictive hallway that they were in. There was no advancing his way from the lab for Itachi. Not unless he wanted to be burned to the bone. A lack of further pursuit prompted Naruto to turn around and venture a daring move, spinning his machete like a fan blade, Suishinki Haritsu Bunkatsu Sen, propeller burst splitter. With wind chakra he blew the ash in Itachi's direction, placing some slicing force behind the gale as a little extra for him. His offensive rush ended when a flock of crows flew through the ash and the wind past Naruto. But following them there came a large fireball that filled the hallway and flew directly toward Naruto. Turning on his heels, Naruto ran in the exact opposite direction to escape flaming death. Damn those Uchiha and their kick-ass fire ninjutsu. Why were they so good at them? Eventually though, the hall split into a fork and Naruto dove toward the left turn, letting Itachi's fireball slam against the wall and engulf it in flames that continued to burn. Getting up from the ground where he dove, Naruto got near the corner of the wall and stuck an explosive tag there before backing away and preparing for Itachi to make the turn to face him, his hands in a ram seal prepared to remotely activate it the second he did. To Naruto's surprise, the tag fizzled out on the wall, getting him to growl lowly. Itachi was really troubling. How in the world he deactivated his tag without even touching it Naruto would never know, but he wished he did because that just didn't seem fair. Taking his machete in hand, Naruto channeled wind chakra through it and hurled it at the wall, trying to take an angle on the corner that separated both he and Itachi from one another. Setsudenki Hasa, slingshot guillotine. It sliced right through the wall like it was butter, and with a jerk of the chain attached, Naruto sliced out an entire segment of the wall that Itachi had to leap into view to avoid. While yanking his machete back into his hand, Naruto dashed toward the visible Itachi and caught the weapon just as he got within range. A clash of blades followed, with Naruto meeting his machete with Itachi's kunai. Itachi tried to knee at one of Naruto's legs to knock his balance off, but Naruto's taijutsu wasn't too shabby at all and he merely blocked him, instead turning Itachi and pushing him against the wall as he slowly started overpowering him. What does Akatsuki want with the Biju? Naruto asked Itachi as he slowly started gaining a pushing edge, moving the blade of his machete closer to Itachi. It is of no importance. Itachi said, struggling in return. It was lucky Naruto was only using one hand. You've grown quite a bit from the Chunin exams all those years ago, Naruto-kun. Several of your moves have been quite surprising. Making small talk during a death struggle that he was apparently losing? Powerful ninjas were weird. You're really good too. Naruto begrudgingly admitted, if you fight this good without even pulling out your Sharingan, it's kind of hard to think about what you'd do if you had it on. But that was neither here nor there. It wasn't on, and with that in mind Naruto still had one free hand to use while pinning Itachi to the wall with his machete. A spinning blue ball of chakra formed in his left hand that he then slammed forward, Rasengan, spiraling sphere. The wall behind Itachi was rendered to rubble via the attack making contact, but as the debris and dust flew, both Naruto and Itachi jumped away from each other, separated by the midair rubbish. The Akatsuki cloak of Itachi was filthy as was Naruto's own attire. Naruto stared at his left hand and then at the stuff in the air hindering his view of Itachi. A small amount of blood dripped from the tip of Naruto's machete onto the ground indicating that he had indeed scored a wound, but not nearly the kind that he wanted and had skillfully set up. He took the cut so he could free up a hand to knock my Rasengan arm off. If his Rasengan had connected they probably would have had to peel Itachi off of the wall. But ifs didn't win battles, fretting over them while you were still fighting just managed to get you killed. Itachi's bicep had taken a pretty nasty injury to it, bleeding down his arm and onto the ground, but other than that his face didn't show any worry. It was clear that Naruto would have rather taken that arm home with him if he'd done that much to force him to choose an ultimatum. That was a good try. Itachi said, holding up his arm and showing Naruto how much it was bleeding. Damn it, if he could do that then all of that blood was just for show. Nothing serious had been done to it, making me choose either option A or option B. Too bad I created an option C for myself. His reflexes just weren't fair. Before choosing to proceed forward and continue fighting, Naruto stopped completely and took notice of the side of the hall that he was on. Without saying another word, Naruto placed the flat of one of his palms onto the wall, much to Itachi's confusion. He didn't make another move until he started breathing slowly and his whisker marks seemed to darken and deepen on his cheeks. A red aura began to form around his body in the outline of a fox with one tail and he twisted his hand against the wall before suddenly clinching it into a fist and pulling it away. Giga Shinto, Giga Impact. A deep fissure formed in the wall and spider webbed to the roof and to the floor, cracking them both and beginning to cause a cave-in of the hall. He utilized the chakra of the Cuba to generate the power he needed to destroy the entire pathway in one move. Itachi thought to himself as he saw things beginning to come down around them, what is he doing? He then watched Naruto grin with his extra sharp canines before vanishing in a red blur in the opposite direction. He's trapping me. The last place Itachi wanted to be was trapped inside of the underground base of Orochimaru. He would be damned if he found himself trapped underground to be crushed in that tiny little corridor. He turned his Sharingan on and dodged the falling rocks to head off in the same direction as Naruto in pursuit. He was fast enough to catch up and see the bright red beacon that was Naruto's chakra as the place came down around them. As they ran, Naruto could feel Itachi's presence behind him and turned to see that he was actually catching up. How fast is this guy? He thought to himself before turning back ahead and lashing out with his chakra tail to strike at the walls and help it come down faster. It did little good as Itachi still kept advancing. Even thrusting the tail out at Itachi directly did nothing as he jumped and stuck to the roof while running until it retracted. Light at the end of the tunnel came and both Naruto and Itachi shot out of there like bullets just as the entrance to it collapsed, leaving them both in the main chamber that led to the three paths where Naruto had started from. Both Itachi and Akuba charged Naruto stared at each other tentatively. That was a dirty trick, Naruto-kun. Itachi said as Naruto's tail swished behind him impatiently, trying to bury me alive. All Naruto did was shrug in return. You're trying to kill me and capture the Kyuubi. I'll fight fair when I'm in a situation where I won't die painfully after I lose. How do you know it will be painful? You're seriously telling me it wouldn't be? No. I was just wondering how you came to the conclusion that it was. A visible frown came upon Naruto's face while Itachi remained deadpan, but that didn't mean anything. Naruto was quite certain that Itachi was messing with him verbally. Damn it, he was good at mid-fight banter. Totally unflappable. Nothing shook the guy, and nothing seemed to surprise him no matter what Naruto tried. So, round 2. If we must. Itachi said in consent to continuing the fight. For someone that killed his entire clan and was after Naruto's still beating heart or however they were going to extract his biju, he wasn't such a bad guy. He definitely wasn't an outright jerk. Too bad that didn't mean anything. They were still on exact opposite sides. Naruto's muscles tensed in preparation for the next move to be made, but before anything else could happen, countless sharp bones rained down on both of them from above, busting through the ventilation shaft in the ceiling meant to provide air to that part of the facility. Both Naruto and Itachi stuck to the walls of the chamber as Kimimaro dropped down, covered in the marks from his cursed seal. It seems as if we have an infestation problem. And in response to the little problem that had befallen the base that he was in charge of, Kimimaro let his seal spread. Naruto's eyes widened at the sight of it. That's like the seal that's on Sasuke. Naruto noted in remembrance as he watched Kimimaro transform. What the hell? Kimimaro's skin dark gray with 6 large bones sticking out of the sides of his back and a long thick tail with bones sticking out of it forming on his backside. Both Naruto and Itachi could only stare at the sight of watching Kimimaro's body composition change entirely. This. Itachi thought to himself, visibly alarmed at what he was seeing, Orochimaru put this on my brother. After finishing his grotesque metamorphosis, Kimimaro held out his hands at both Naruto and Itachi as the sharp tips of bones emerged from his palms, Tsunkusaku Hasa, twin drilling missiles. More of the bones poked out to reveal that the tips were to tight spirals, which were how the bones had been manipulated, and just like that they both fired at Naruto and Itachi each with speed as if they were shot from cannons. Each bone utterly pulverized the wall that it hit on impact, turning them to rubble. But both Naruto and Itachi moved, seeming to take offense to Kimimaro interrupting their ongoing tiff, as both moved to incorporate him into the fray if he was so dead set on interjecting himself. Naruto hurled rudimentary balls of sheer wind chakra compacted by the Kyuubi's chakra using his hands and chakra tail while Itachi threw a handful of shuriken while simultaneously breathing fire on them and infusing them with fire release, Katon, Housenkatsu Mabeni, fire release, Phoenix Sage Flower Nail Crimson. Both attacks were aimed at Kimimaro and mixed to cause a fiery explosion that filled the chamber and rocked the base to its core. Elsewhere in the base, the sounds of battle reached deeply inside of the barracks area of the hideout as Gurren felt like things were closing in. If she could hear the battle from all the way where she was, that idiot Kimimaro was going to probably go overboard, which would result in the entire place coming down. When that asshole chose to go all out and kill someone he didn't know when to stop. Come on Yukimaru, we've got to get out of here. Gurren said, leading Yukimaru along, running and allowing the younger boy to keep pace with her so that she didn't lose him. We need to take the back way. I'll get us somewhere safe. We can't let them get you. Orochimaru needed this boy's body. A Jinchuriki host was far too valuable to be allowed to slip out of his grasp. A body that potentially strong could do anything he dreamed to with his physiology. Struggling to keep up with the kunoichi that was his keeper for the time being, Yukimaru felt a sense of dread inside of his chest. Is it the Akatsuki group? He had been around in Otogaku long enough to know that that group was the absolute worst of the worst, and he knew exactly what they wanted from them. They wanted him to take his life and steal the Sanba from within his body. From where they were in the base they could see the ocean through the openings carved out in the wall to somewhat resemble windows. It was still a rough 100-foot descent to the jagged rocky water before they could make it there. It probably is. Gurren told him, not seeing the point in hiding the truth from him. There was no need to sugarcoat it. It could also be Konoha, it could also be Kiri. Don't worry about that, you just worry about getting out of here. For some reason the air began to chill sharply, but it was ignored until she pulled Yukimaru out of the way of a pair of needles aimed for the both of them. At that point a thick wall of solid ice inexplicably formed in front of them, blocking them from continuing on their path. Narrowing her eyes, Gurren turned around and found Haku and Suijutsu standing behind her. Haku's hand was on the wall with a frost trail leading to the point where an ice barrier blocked them off. Sorry. Haku said, actually sounding apologetic about what they were doing despite the Hunter-nin mask on her face, but we can't let you just leave with that boy. She remarked, getting a flinch out of Yukimaru, he needs to come with us back to Kirigakure. Gurren let out a scoff and stood in front of Yukimaru, shielding him from possible danger, so that your village can have that military superiority it needs to save face from that war of yours. You're just going to use him as a weapon. Both Haku and Suijutsu looked at each other momentarily before the latter shrugged and addressed Guren's point. Yeah, and? It's better than making him into a human trench coat like how Orochimaru's going to do. He heard Yukimaru gasp and lazily cleaned out his ear with a finger as if he were just shooting the breeze. Yeah kid, you didn't know? That's not too surprising since I doubt that Snake wants you going full Biju freak out on him when he tries to take your body. Stop talking. Guren demanded sharply, narrowing her eyes at Suijutsu before speaking to her young charge. Yukimaru, if these people wind up taking you they'll just try to condition you, and if that fails they'll just take the sanbi out of you and place it into another. Everything that Orochimaru-sama saw that was special in you will be wasted. Yukimaru's eyes quivered at the thought of dying after finding a place like Otagakure where he had finally been able to fall in with others that found something in him worth taking stock in. No, this is my home. My place is here. Haku just shook her head and Suijutsu let out a sigh as he slung Kubikuri Boucha from his back and the blade of the massive sword hit the ground with a clang. Listen kid, that thing you've got inside of you, it used to be in Kiri's Mizukage until Orochimaru took him out, so it's ours anyway. Now we'll take the whole package deal of you with it and treat you like a Kiri ninja with the full concessions, no stress, but if you're gonna be a pain I can just kick this chick's ass and Haku-chan here can flash freeze you so we can take you back. Either way works just fine with me. While she wished that Suijutsu had a more subtle way of putting things into perspective, Haku wasn't about to lie and claim that they weren't going to do exactly that if it came to it. It was a mission, one of great importance, and it didn't necessarily involve killing so it wasn't one she was about to fail on purpose. A crystal blade formed on Guren's forearm, but Haku didn't seem alarmed by this. You have a rare Kekai Genkai too. From what I've been told of your abilities by my friends you can crystallize things down to their cellular level, can you not? I think you'll find that this presents you with no advantage in a battle with me. Don't spoil the surprise honey. Suijutsu joked, holding up his legendary sword with two hands as he prepared to fight. Let her find out the fun way if she really wants to keep the brat from us like this. A growl came from Guren's throat at the prospect of fighting these people 2-on-1. She wasn't accustomed to being on the wrong end of a numbers advantage. She normally had hordes of flunkies to throw at the enemy to fight, but all she had here was Yukimaru, and he was strictly VIP status. But that didn't mean he was entirely useless either, even if they were technically cornered. Yukimaru. Guren said lowly, have you progressed farther in your control of the Sanba since the last time I was in Mizu no Kuni? She asked, getting a nod out of the youngster. Well, I want you to cut loose as much as you can. What if I lose control? Yukimaru asked worriedly. His powers let him tame the Sanba by sheer will and call upon some of its abilities, but he was afraid that if things got too intense he'd slip up and get Guren hurt. He didn't want that. He actually liked her a lot. You might get dash dot. Who do you think I am, kid? A confident-looking Guren said, putting up a front to get him to fight with her. If things go bad I can bring you back under control. There's a reason I spent all of that time with you back when it first got sealed inside of you. Emboldened a bit from her statement, Yukimaru prepared himself to fight while Guren turned back to Haku and Suijutsu. You both made the last mistakes of your lives coming here. Yukimaru has the Sanba now, you lost it, your village should have just dealt with it. Oh but it did. Haku said, brandishing more senbon for use in battle, or should I say it is, because that of course is why we were dispatched, to handle Otagakure's thievery and kidnapping accordingly. Omake, Guardian Days 5. 9 months after Naruto and Shikamaru's acceptance. Another day, another protection detail for a traveling noble. Most of the job was obviously protecting others as the name of the group was the 12 Guardian Ninja, but most of the time they never really got to protect anyone that tended to get into many scrapes. Naruto was promised that there would be more trouble when the daimyo took his yearly tour of the country, and it was always fun when they'd travel with him on his trips to the Chunin exams twice a year, so there was that to look forward to. But at the moment he was walking alongside a carriage rolling down a countryside road slowly. He was one of 3 guardians on this mission. It was him taking point and walking out in front with his clones securing the perimeter off-road, the colorful kimono-clad Kotoko who was sitting on the roof of the carriage above the driver's seat seemingly without a care in the world as she strummed at her shamisen serenely. The third member of their team taking the rear of the carriage was someone that had been in the group before Naruto. A monk of some sort named Kenta. He was older than both Naruto and even Kodoko, being a grown man, and he towered over both of them. He was an extremely muscular dark-skinned man that wore a wicker helmet covering his entire head and keeping his face from view. Not even his eyes were visible. He wore no shirt, just loose lavender pants with his ankles bandaged down at his sandals and the guardian sash around his waist. In his hand he carried a long staff with multiple golden rings at the top of it. A pretty scary-looking guy really. It had been the first mission that Naruto had ever gone on with this particular member of the Guardian Ninja group, and he had only met him once back during his training. He had been gone on a long mission and had stopped back for a week or so to meet the new blood before going off on another one. Man! Naruto complained aloud, "Why do I have to take point?" he asked, craning his neck to look back and up at Kodoko. "My clones are all over the place keeping track of what's around us." If Shikamaru had been there he'd have been bitching from the very start about having to walk. They'd been traveling for 2 days. It's standard operating procedure, Naruto-kun. Kodoko chimmered melodiously, eyes closed in her permanent smile. "You're down there and I'm up here because I am a virtuous lady of refinement and purity. And you are a ragamuffin with a foul mouth that I had to clean out with soap." Seriously, she took a bar of soap to his mouth after he cursed them following a rather brutal training session. "Aside from that, would you really force me to walk all the way to the town we'll be stopping at for the night?" He would. Without question he would, and he'd smile while he did it. Chivalry didn't mean jack when you were a ninja. Still, he would not stop harping on her about why he couldn't sit on top of the carriage. She could go inside. That was where she had been when they had started, right along with their protectee until a few hours ago. "Well, why can't Kenta take point and you go inside while I sit on the roof? He's huge. He'll be fine. He's like 3 of me." Kodoko just laughed slightly at his query and shook her head. "Oh, but Naruto-kun, compared to Kenta-chan you're brand new. He's done this a million billion times, so he's earned the right to take the cushier assignment. He is your senpai. He already knows how this goes. You're the one that needs seasoning. The only reason he's not up here too with me is because he's massive." Naruto looked back at the silent and hulking brand new guardian and just stared for a bit. He was well over 20 years old and probably had twice or 3 times the experience he did. It was surprising that with everything Naruto had been saying for the past 3 hours trying to start up some conversation he hadn't responded or cracked him in the head to get him to shut up. As far as Naruto knew, Kenta never talked. The imposing man had yet to say more than 2 words to anyone, and apparently none of them had ever seen him without that fucking basket on his head. Besides, Kodoko continued idly while beginning a new song on her instrument of death, "I think if I go back inside I might wind up killing one of the nobles of the court. He's a little handsy. I told him that he was a married man, but no, that didn't seem to matter. So I knocked him out." That prompted Naruto to look at the borderline insane woman with an owlish expression before he moved back and opened the door to look inside. And indeed the fancily dressed noble was out cold with a contusion on his noggin. Probably from where Kodoko had dinged him with her shamisen. Also in the carriage was the frightened attendant of the noble, seemingly frozen in shock or fear of Kodoko, either one or the other. "Nobuyuki's not gonna like this," Naruto mentioned under his breath as he retook his position at the front, even though he really didn't care other than how it affected his job. "Shizunene will though, she hates that guy." And that made him feel better. Anything that made that sweet dark-haired medic smile was great. Kenta just kept walking behind them, not seeming to have an opinion on what they had both just learned, but then again with that damn basket on his head, who really knew what he was thinking? "You don't talk much, do you?" Naruto asked Kenta, only for the man to continue walking as if he were ignoring him, something that annoyed Naruto greatly. "Oi, don't think just because you're huge that I can't dash dot." "He's taken a vow of silence, Naruto-kun," Kodoko mentioned, keeping Naruto from bristling up too heavily for no real reason. He was so easy to rile up, like a big orange-clad puppy. As cute as she found it, this was not the time or the place. He can't speak or take that helmet off while the sun is up. Though I do think he should carry a notepad or something to communicate with. Oh, or we could all learn sign language. But Sadeo-kun is a monk of a different sect and has his own things that he can't do too. He just muttered something about stupid when I brought it up and walked away. Naruto's mouth formed a silent O and he turned back to Kenta with a sheepish grin. Sorry about that. If it makes you feel any better you can yell at me later when the sun goes down. Kenta just nodded in acknowledgement. Naruto didn't know what that meant, but at least he assumed that the man forgave him. Ah, that's so cute. Kotoko remarked, starting a new tune, more upbeat than the previous one. Naruto-kun and Kenta-chan are friends. I will play us a song commemorating the occasion. Play one that commemorates us getting suspended when we get back. Naruto spoke up over the sound of Kotoko's next song, hands placed behind his neck a bit lazily, because you knocked out the guy we're supposed to be protecting. It was unknown what was weirder, the fact that she stopped and took Naruto's clearly sarcastic request, or the fact that Kotoko apparently did have a song that she played to commemorate getting suspended. That meant that this kind of thing happened enough for her to endeavor to learn it. So when it came to seniors to defer to on this mission he had to pick between a scary big functional mute and a beautiful homicidal maniac. It had to be a cold day in hell, because Uzumaki Naruto was currently the sanest member of his squad. For how long that would last was to be determined. This job man. That's it for part 23. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.